That takes us to non-government business. The Honourable Sophia Morwand.
Okay. Thank you, President. I move that this House, A, acknowledges the risks social media has for children and their emotional, physical, cogitative and social well-being. B, supports calls for the restriction of access to explicit materials for minors and for safeguarding measures to be implemented by social media platforms. C, recognises the harm that porn causes to individuals and society through perpetuating and normalising violence against women. And D, recognises that the hypersexualisation of girls and the role social media plays in grooming is increasing.
Members, the Honourable Sophia Morwand has moved that motion, and the question is the motion be agreed. The Honourable Sophia Morwand.
Yep. Thank you, President. So today I would like to talk about the safeguarding and health of children and how various factors influence that. So now social media in general has been shown to play a role in cyberbullying, sleep disorders, fear of missing out, body dissatisfaction, unrealistic expectations, addiction, in particular dopamine that we're talking about here, privacy, anxiety, social isolation, low self-esteem, and the spreading of false information. All of that above has led me to starting to think about that there needs to be some sort of age restriction around the use of social media. It is interesting, though, that this motion came about before the current suggestions by the federal government regarding social media and children. Now, I'm not a parent, and I can only imagine how hard it might be to keep children away from social media. But the stats don't lie. Children are being groomed en masse by predatory men via apps and in chat rooms. So we are also seeing an increase in mental health issues in young people as well. And I think it's fair to state that it is obvious that social media plays a role in that too. Now, just going back to the grooming side of things. Now, according to the FBI, over 50% of the victims of online sexual exploitation are between the ages of 12 and 15. And when you look at that from a psychological development profile from children in puberty, it kind of makes sense that that age group is very vulnerable. Now, an estimated 89% of sexual advances directed at children occur in internet chat rooms or through instant messaging. In the UK, over 32,000 cases of grooming were recorded by the police over the last 6 years. In Australia, in 2021, the Child Protection Triage Unit received more than 33,000 reports of online child sexual exploitation. Now, each of these reports contains images and videos of children being sexually assaulted or exploited for the sexual gratification of online child sex offenders. Okay, one of the things that one of the terms that gets thrown around this is that it is a victimless crime having child sex abuse material that you didn't produce yourself on your computer, for instance. It's not. Every time a child's photo is taken or shared, okay, it increases the appetite for that type of material. Now, there are examples of men using porn. Initially, it was much more vanilla, and over time, due to neuroplasticity and dopamine, they started looking at more extreme abuse materials. And now the porn industry is aware of this, so they have several channels that they push users into, and one of those channels is to provide material that with younger and younger looking actresses in there. And just in regards to that, about 80% of women that are in porn material that you can access online are actually sex trafficked. Now, in 2021, the AFP charged a total of 237 people with 2,032 alleged child abuse-related offences. Now, in the past 12 months, the Child Triage Unit has reviewed more than 217,000 media files that relate to reports of child sexual abuse and exploitation. This shows that that is increasing. Now, they do work closely with national and international law enforcement agencies, prevention organisations, and the private sector as well as civil society to drive a collaborative national response to counter the exploitation of children in Australia. I have made over the years numerous reports to Facebook in particular about obvious trafficking of women and children, but it often doesn't go against community guidelines. So now X and Threads are both filled with sexual exploitation posts as well. And my complaints about that aren't being taken seriously there either. So even when you're looking at a community who's trying to help the safeguarding of children, the organisations involved in the distribution are not actually open to listening to us. And I think that the stance currently of the federal government is to make those companies more accountable, which I think is a very good idea. So in regards to porn, once again, I think because it has become so freely available, it created a process where it's normalising certain harmful sex acts that weren't common before, probably about 20 or 30 years ago. Now, okay, well, good. The young people have gone. And what we are seeing more and more commonly being shown in porn is things like fisting and choking. So porn has been shown to reduce empathy for rape victims and is known to be able to restructure the brain with a process known as neuroplasticity. Okay, so with porn becoming more freely available and it normalising violence against women, so when we look at porn, about 80 to 90% of porn actually shows violence against women. It's degrading and often quite painful for the women as well. Now, the excess of porn is easy, and we are seeing children, in particular boys, accessing that at about 8-9 years of age. So they're getting shown these extreme behaviours, extreme sex acts. They think they are normal, okay, and that is, porn is now part of their sex education, basically. It is harmful because those boys will not learn how to have a decent relationship with women. As a result of that, too, by the way, there's been a massive increase in erectile dysfunction in very young men too, simply because the abuse material that they're watching is numbing their brain. Now, all of that reduces the status of women and girls in our society and fuels sexism and misogyny and entitlement to women's sexual functions. Okay. The thing with porn, though, and the normalisation of sexual violence against women is that it obviously flows over onto girls as well, but it is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and that makes it hard to control and regulate. And when we are looking at the different categories of porn that people are getting channeled into, there's rape porn, torture porn, sissy porn, hentai, racial classifications, and then obviously child sex abuse material. With social media and parents posting photos of their children online, those photos are being used by predatory men to possibly groomed that particular child or used the images to create child sex abuse material, to such a degree even that a mother found her daughter's face on a child sex doll that was being imported into Australia. Okay, and this, the availability of child sex dolls in itself is a massive concern. Two, when we look at the brain and sexual gratification, you basically need stronger and stronger materials to achieve that. So while some people may think that a child sex doll is quite harmless because it means that an actual child isn't being harmed, those who are sexual abusers will always escalate. That is the one thing that we know about porn and about sex crimes, is that it may start off fairly innocent, but it always ends up with actual crimes and, in this case, children suffering. Now, men have learned some very clever strategies to utilise social media in accessing vulnerable children. So obviously there's parents who put their photos of children up there, there's the mumfluencers, there's now kidfluencers as well, and all of that is providing material for pedophiles, even to such a degree that pedophile handbooks are available on the darknet that provide clear instructions on how to groom a child. And I have to say, I find it an incredibly disturbing piece of knowledge. Now, in response to that, this was on the same thread that I found out about these books, is that when a pedophile grooms a child, even if they don't end up getting access to that child, they know that they have already made it easier for the next person to groom that child. Okay, so it might not just be that one man that might be a problem, but once that child is kind of known to be groomed, there may be other men that will come to that. Another strategy that is employed is looking for single mums on dating apps, and ideally with a drug addiction and a house, they love bomb her and then move in, which is also giving access to those children, but showing the role of the internet into allowing access. So one of the things that we could look at with social media would be an age verification system. It's interesting to note that just overnight this topic seems to have exploded, and that there are concerns around digital ID and other things about trying to control social media. I think a good solution would be for all children to only be able to download materials via the internet, say via the App Store, when that being related to their parents' credit card. And that would hopefully stop some children accessing certain materials. The other thing, and this is a shame that this has now happened, is that having children-specific apps and gender-specific apps is now also made so much harder after the Roxy and Tickle case. Okay, so another factor influencing children and grooming and sexual violence is video games. Now, I know that lots of people don't believe that is the case, but when you're looking at Grand Theft Auto, for instance, you are seeing the normalisation of violence against women. I think Grand Theft Auto has a game, an aspect in there where if you run over a prostitute or you bash a prostitute, in this game you get extra points for that. Now, obviously, that is going to very much reduce the status of women and girls, reduce empathy for women and girls as well. And this is a lot of those influences that we are seeing throughout society, you can bring back to porn normalising violence and making it more acceptable. Another aspect of that is certain materials that are coming out. And one of those examples is in a library recently where a book was found that was describing harmful sex acts, and that book was available to children at all ages. Now, I just want to reiterate that I think sex education is incredibly important for children to have. It needs to really focus on consent. People need to teach the right language to children about body parts. If something does happen to a child, that they can say, this person touched me there, and that they are taught that if they feel uncomfortable with something, with an adult doing certain things, or with anyone that they know doing certain things to them, that they, one, can indicate who that person is, and two, that they can say very clearly, this is uncomfortable, stop, and three, if it does continue, that they feel comfortable enough talking to another person about that, and having proper language around genitalia is very important for that. Now, this book that I'm talking about did talk about consent to some degree, but it also had in there, like I said, fisting, choking, anal sex and scissoring, which are all advanced acts. And I have to say, I did not think I would ever be saying these words in this place. But that particular book was available to children that were 5, 6 years of age, and I don't think that should be. That older children need education about these things, yeah, but certainly I don't believe any child below 10, 12 years of age needs to learn about that. One of the other things that was available in the library that really quite surprised me was a bowl of wrapped condoms. Now, when we talk about condoms, children need to know about, older children, I'd say, probably need to know about preventatives. But one of the things on condoms that was mentioned was that love is not a crime. Now, I understand the origins of that, right? And when we are looking at the same-sex attraction, right, that is where this comes from. And I agree, that shouldn't be a crime. However, this is a term that could well be used to groom a child. Say the child sees that, it is very easy to say for an adult, a predatory adult, to say, well, love is not a crime, and here we go. They have had it validated in their library. Now, that should not be that is not materials that should be available to children under about 10, 12 years of age. And when they do get taught about these things, I think that should be with parental consent. All right. In regards to consent, there are 5 very clear principles relating to that. It should be free and voluntary. It should be very specific and informed. So basically, consent needs to be enthusiastic and with no unequal power dynamics in that relationship. Consent must be able to be withdrawn at any time. And having consented once does not mean that consent can be assumed beyond that. It needs to be ongoing and mutual, and it needs to reflect capacity, so that everybody involved in a sexual act needs to have the capacity to reach, communicate or withhold consent, and that factors that influence that include age, intoxication, consciousness and other impairment, but definitely age. Anyway, in the end, we need to make sure that children are safeguarded, that they are not open or exposed to predatory people, and the acknowledgement that social media plays a huge role in the grooming of children, and that is something that needs to be managed, is very, very important. Thank you.
Members, the question is the motion be agreed. The Honourable Donna Farragut.
Thank you, President. And look, I'm very happy to make a contribution to this motion, which I note is actually being done today on Are You OK Day. I think it's actually important that we reflect that. It is a really important discussion that we have, and a very timely one. Obviously, as you mentioned, as the member mentioned, there is a lot of commentary around this issue at the moment, and particularly around banning children from accessing social media until a certain age. The federal opposition a few months ago stated that increasing the age for which children are able to access various social media platforms would be a high priority in government. The Prime Minister has now come out saying that he wants a ban, albeit he's working through I suppose settling on a time frame and a date, an age that should be in place. South Australia has already opened up consultation on some draft legislation in relation to banning social media for children under the age of 14, as well as putting in some requirements with respect to social media companies and parental consent. Other premiers, I know Premier Roger Cook has also indicated support. I think he's keen to see it done at a national level or from a uniform perspective, and certainly our Liberal leader, Libby Mettam, has also offered bipartisan support in that regard. I have to say, depending on who you speak to and what you read in the paper, a ban is either a really good idea or a really bad idea. Either way, I think we just need to get real here. I'm actually supportive of some form of ban, but I also recognise that a ban alone is not going to resolve this problem. And it is a problem, and it's an insidious problem, and the Honourable Sophia Momond has outlined some of the significant issues around it today. And it does have and can have significant consequences for everyone, not just children and young people, but in particular children and young people. And I would say, particularly with respect in certain circumstances to women and young girls, and that's obviously the focus of this particular motion. For better or worse though, technology is here to stay. Everyone has a mobile phone, a tablet, apps. I reckon if I did a survey of everyone in this room today, in the chamber today, everyone would have checked their Facebook at least once. I don't have Instagram, but you probably checked that too. So I think we do need to recognise that. But there are significant risks, particularly with respect to children, in terms of the impact on their emotional health and social well-being. I was speaking with a school leader just last week in relation to this very issue, and they were lamenting the fact that children are coming to school in years 4 and 5. They've been given state-of-the-art mobile phones. They're bringing them to school, and they are, in certain circumstances, accessing social media, despite the fact that there is supposed to be some restrictions in place. And it is having an impact, and it's not a positive one. It's a negative one. Now, I understand, and I think we all do, that there are reasons why a child might be given a phone, safety reasons, for example. I don't think that's necessarily, I think that needs to be understood. But I have to say, why on earth is a child being able to access social media at such a young age? But it's happening. Now, a report by the Commissioner for Children and Young People, I think it was actually the former Commissioner because it was back in 2021, it was a report titled Girls' Wellbeing, and it was insights from their 2021 Speaking Out survey. And it said of this, in terms of girls, almost one half, or 46% of female students in years 7 to 9, and 61% of students in years 10 to 12 have been sent unwanted sexual content like pornographic pictures, videos or words. For the girls who've received this type of content, it has been overwhelmingly sent through social media. i.e. significantly less by text message or email. That survey didn't specifically reference questions in and around social media, but they did take the views of young people who were surveyed. Now, there was a cross-section of views, I would say, from the young people in terms of what they see the benefits or negatives of social media, but just a couple of the comments that were made that were reported in the document says this. A 14-year-old said, social media has a big effect on mental health within the youth now. It can be good and bad. Social media is good to keep up with friends, know what's happening around the world and overall have fun, but it can also be used for cyberbullying and hate. A 15-year-old said, sexual assault and nudes, that kind of thing is a huge issue for my age group. I've received many nude requests before. Most people I know send nudes and receive tons too. So yeah, drugs and sexual stuff and drinking, they're huge issues and most people get away with it. Another 15-year-old said, punish those who forward on nudes without consent and those who show you nudes, even if you told them repeatedly you don't want to see. And this could be solved by banning VPN and Snapchat and other social media platforms. And with respect to media content, and obviously the Honourable Sophia Momont has referenced this throughout her contribution, but another report by the Commissioner titled Exploring the Declining Wellbeing for Australian Girls did reflect on various research that has been undertaken. And it referenced a particular New South Wales study which gauged the views and perspectives of 14 and 18-year-olds with regard to sexual content online, including pornography, and found that exposure to sexualised content through social media was almost unavoidable and was often unintended. The participants reported seeing sexual advertisements, pop-up ads or sexual content in their news feeds that a friend had liked. Girls reported seeing more photos of women and sexually suggestive poses, while boys reported seeing more images that were sexually explicit. It goes on to say that another study in both Australia and the US of women aged 18 to 25 years found that spending more time on Instagram was associated with greater self-objectification and internalisation of the beauty ideal. And there's more information there as well. Look, the reality is that social media has an impact. It can be positive. I mean, there are positives in terms of social media, but absolutely there are negative consequences as well. And you know, I was looking on on Kids Helpline just today, and they've got some information in relation to this, and they've actually got the heading is "Why Anxiety Loves Insta." And, you know, it goes through, perhaps in more kid-friendly terms, some of the negative ways that social media can impact well-being, including focusing on appearance, fake and misleading images, cyberbullying, trolling, catfishing, doxing, FOMO, fear of missing out, and actually spending time just scrolling rather than instead of socialising and engaging with others and better self-care. So look, I'm supportive of calls for greater restrictions and other protective measures when it comes to social media and technology. Media companies, social media companies, regulators and government have a clear role, but I'm actually not going to say that government have the entire role. It's not entirely for government to fix. Parents and caregivers absolutely have a crucial role when it comes to social media. Positive communication between parents and their children about technology use and social media, active parental monitoring and technology controls are also really important. This is something that is a real issue. I mean, I've got a 13-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy. This is a very much a live issue that we talk about to them. And, you know, I think increasing the knowledge of children in terms of access to positive resources, strategies and supports in terms of how they manage their social media activity and the online world more generally is also critical. And I know that schools are doing work in relation to that. My son comes home and tells me what they've been talking about, and that's a good thing. But none of these will happen in isolation, can happen in isolation, and not one single fix will work. And I'll just I'm running out of time, but I did just see a comment from the Professor Ben Edwards from the ANU Centre for Social Policy Research. It was on SBS News, and he said the most dangerous option when it comes to social media is doing nothing at all, and for that I absolutely agree.
Members, the question is the motion be agreed. The Leader of the House.
Very much, President, and thank you to the Honourable Sophia Mormont for bringing this important subject for us to debate today. And I suspect there will be complete agreement around the chamber about the dangers that young people and not so young people are facing. I did make the joke with my colleagues that I wish someone would ban me from social media. And the Honourable Donna Faragher raised the issue of the things that young people are dealing with, including FOMO, which is the fear of missing out. I'm looking forward to missing out after May of next year. I can't wait to miss out. But while I am making a joke about it, it is a serious thing. I'm 62 and social media can sometimes get to me. I can't imagine being 8, 9, I can't imagine being a teenager and having to deal with some of those issues. I too have noted the debate and the kind of narrative this week from youth advocates saying a ban is not going to work. It's the kind of anti-prohibition argument. I understand it, and I think really the onus rests with us as regulators, government as regulators, and most appropriately with the platforms to control what goes online and to control access to that. But there's been a complete market failure. They have refused to accept responsibility. I'm in an ongoing exchange of correspondence with who I refer to as Mr. Facebook about what they're doing. They claim to have teams that are working on this and making sure that material is taken down that's not appropriate. But the fact is they have failed to protect young people, and so government needs to step in, and if we can get the process of verifying the age of users right, and that's what the Prime Minister is working on, if we can get that right, then we're going to have to take stronger action because the platform providers have absolutely failed. So it is a relevant topic. There have been increasing numbers of really tragic stories where children and young people have gone into an awful spiral of self-harm and mental illness, and unfortunately for some of them, suicide, as a consequence of, if you like, unsupervised access to some really awful things. I'm pleased to be part of a government that has taken steps. Premier Roger Cook has supported the action taken by South Australia and the Prime Minister, and hopefully we will be part of something more. When I was Minister for Education in 2022, we announced consent education. We were one of the first states in Australia to put consent education into the curriculum of schools. The good thing about that process was that all of the school sectors, the independents, the Catholics and the public schools all supported that. They were calling out for it. Of course, the material is age appropriate and the material evolves as children evolve, but there are serious issues to be tackled, and we do need to better arm our young people to protect themselves. I also note that our National E-Safety Commissioner, just in July of this year, has issued notices to the online industry, giving them 6 months to come up with enforceable codes to protect children from graphic pornography and other high-impact content. She said that pornography is so pervasive and invasive that children are often exposed to it by accident and at increasingly younger ages. And it is the case, there's plenty of research to say that that kind of inappropriate age exposure does lead to serious issues for those young people, for those children, and we do need to better regulate to provide protection for them. So one of the other things that I was pleased that we could do, and this was really Premier McGowan who said he'd had enough, mainly driven by his experience of 3 young people who were very close to him, of the impacts of mobile phones. And so we banned the use of mobile phones during school time. And apart from anything else, one of the reasons for doing that was just to give them an enforced break, so they could just disconnect from that kind of exposure, even for just, 6 or so hours, 5 days a week, so that they learnt that the world wasn't going to collapse, the sky wasn't going to fall down if they were not looking at their phones. Of course, they needed, from time to time for learning purposes, and lots of times teenage kids have jobs and they need their mobile phone to check their rosters at the fast food joint or whatever, and those things were allowed. But actually enforcing a break, we did extensive consultation when we were introducing it, and I remember one of the schools in the northern suburbs, it's escaped me, one of the secondary schools, when I met with the young people there, and that school had done it kind of voluntarily. What the young people and the teachers said was what they noticed was how much noise there was in the playground after they banned the phones, and that they hadn't noticed that there was not so much noise because kids hadn't been talking to each other as much, or running around and doing all the stuff that they do in recess and lunchtime as much while they were on their phones. And once their phones were not accessible to them, they started talking to each other and doing all of the things that that they should have been doing. So it goes to show that you can, through policy, make changes to limit the impact, but all of us have to do more, and no smaller group needs to do more than the platform providers. I mean, they really cannot pretend that they exist in a vacuum. They cannot pretend that they have no social licence to do the things that they do, and they need to act in a far more effective way than they have been. The great thing about them is that they have demonstrated that they can innovate, that they can do all sorts of fabulous things technically. I do not accept for 1 minute that they don't have the capacity technically to innovate to ensure that their product is safe for children. They're choosing not to, and I think we just need to call that out. They are choosing not to do that. It's not the fact that, you can't create the technology to do that. They've created technology to do all sorts of things. I just need to think about a new pair of shoes, and all of a sudden on my mobile phone, shoes are appearing. And if that's not a function of someone being in their 60s, I don't know what is, those words that I just said. But anyway, they can innovate, they can devote the resources to making sure that their product is safe. It's convenient, it's great fun, it needs to be safe. Now, I've got more time left and there's more that I could say, but I know there's a lot of people that want to speak on this, so I'll end my comments there.
Members, the question is the motion be agreed. The Leader of the Opposition.
To make a few comments on this very pertinent motion. I thank the Honourable Sophia Mamont for bringing it to the chamber. And I'm just going to go back in time a little bit for the benefit of some members, because I'm an old fogey, and explain what communication used to be like prior to social media. Now, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and in those days in Kalgoorlie, I remind members, it was only some people that had a phone, and it was a landline. Right? We didn't get TV until the late 60s, early 70s. So what actually happened, it's pertinent, this is pertinent, because what actually happened then was You couldn't just ring up. You had to go to an exchange. You had to ring to the exchange and get through to someone. If you wanted to ring Perth, you had to book your phone call. And they're subscriber trunk dialing in those days, otherwise known as STDs, which was, we used it differently in those days. And you never thought about phoning overseas. You didn't. That was just a simple. That was communication. You know, life was uncomplicated. It was simple, but God, it was good. And that was a life without social media. Now, I'm not for a moment suggesting all of social media is bad. What I'm saying is that was where we've come from, and we've accelerated enormously over the decades. In the 80s, it was a bit more improved. Pretty much every house had a landline. When I came down and went to uni and went to St Columba, we didn't have phones in our room. There was one phone, public phone, and you used to have to line up to use it. Yep, and that's right, the old circular phones. And but at least we'd improved, and so communication got a bit better in those days. But if you're out in the town, etc., out and around, you still had to use a public phone. You didn't have mobile. By the early 90s, mobiles came in, right? They were like bricks. I didn't have one until the late 90s, but if you wanted mobile, there's great big things. And, you know, they sometimes worked, sometimes didn't. But then in the early 90s and pretty much towards the early 2000s, in the 21st century, phones became not just a communication weapon and vehicle, they became an information gathering and dissemination vehicle. And that's when the whole landscape changed for communication, the whole landscape. And this brings me on to the point from the Honourable Sophia Marmont, because while information gathering, dissemination has its advantages, also has its disadvantages, and particularly with youth, particularly with young people, but not exclusively. It crosses boundaries. It has completely changed. Social media has now become the norm in our community, completely the norm. And it rules a lot of people's lives. In a lot of instances, it's a positive vehicle, but in many instances, it's a very, very negative, sinister vehicle. And that's what the crux of this motion is all about. And it's important that we understand just how negative it can be. Back in the days, in our days, bullying was pretty much, you know, hitting someone on the arm, etc. You know, make no bones about it, bullies are much more sophisticated nowadays. They use the vehicle of their iPhones and their phones, etc., and social media to ostracise, to demonise, to literally castigate their peers. And it's something might be something as minuscule as taking someone off a chat group, or you know, making the words, because words are so powerful. Words are much more powerful than the hand. You know, whatever they say to these young kids, and they isolate the kids. And those kids, it first puts that seed of doubt. I call them old Jake, negative energy. Get old Jake up there with those 10, 11, 12-year-olds, with their peers telling them something about their weight or something about their acne or something about whatever, or what a terrible person they are. And it starts to build and build and build and reinforces. And the mind's such a battlefield with these kids, and their uncomplicated life all of a sudden becomes complicated. And that's what happens. That's what happens. So that's what bullying is much more about. You know, and then you've got all of the other associated, dare I say, advantages stroke evils of social media. With things, you know, like relationships now. You know, gone are the days when you go down to Steve's and try and meet someone. Nowadays, you go onto one of these social apps and swipe right, and all of a sudden you've got multiple people at your beck and call. You know, how's that good for developing solid relationships? You're as good as a swipe right. Right? I mean, it's just extra, but that's what they do. You know, I know I'm an old fogey, but I don't care. I still rather go down to Steve's and have a drink and meet someone, have a chat and meet them personally. But anyway, that's what happens. But it is dangerous for children, as I said, and but at the same time, then you've got that other vestige of social media with Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and all these sorts of things, and they're great for a while and they're a good way to I find I use Facebook quite regularly and Instagram, but it's just my friends. I don't actually have a political Facebook or Instagram page, but it's a really good way to catch up with old coal people or old tennis people or whatever, old teaching friends, etc. And yet it's a good way to interact. But it's also, on the other hand, it can be also quite sinister. And this is because of the fact that these platforms have no moral compass. To them, they're money-making exercises. They don't care if it's a 3-year-old or if it's a 90-year-old. All they care about is that they can use their platform to make money. And that's what's going on. So they use these platforms, and of course, you see every day, you see these 3-year-olds with their mum and dad's iPhone, you know, just playing a game or whatever it might be. But that, of course, is an instruction manual for when they get a bit older. They'll want their own iPhone by the time they're about 6 or 7 or 8. And I'm pleased that the government banned the phones in public schools. They're banned in a lot of the private schools, because what actually happens then, again, they become much more sophisticated in the usage of social media. And make no bones about it, no matter how many ways in which the platforms purportedly try and restrict child access, they'll find a way around it. They really will. And all they have to do then is download any form of nudity, pornographic material, and all of a sudden their life has changed. And again, back in the good old days where you didn't have a landline, you know, porn was, quite frankly, Playboy and Penthouse, and that was it. You know, and porn, I'm serious, that's what it was. Nowadays, of course, it's not. You go on there and there's multiple cases. And you have a look at the exploitation of these kids through the social media now. Constantly you are seeing instances where juveniles are either exploiting their peers or exploiting someone below, younger, or adults exploiting their peers or exploiting young people through these platforms, constantly. And you're seeing these instances where these young kids have got so much mental anguish because they are being demonised in the eyes of their peers, or they're being exploited by people older than themselves. That's what's going on. And they can't, old Jake gets up there and they can't take it, and so many of these young kids are being mentally impacted to such a degree that their life becomes meaningless and they take their lives. That's happening over and over again. So, as I said, that aspect of it, that aspect of social media is sinister. There are positive aspects of social media, which I've talked about, and I think most of us in here engage in. We wouldn't contemplate the prospect of using social media as a platform for those sinister motives. But make no bones about it, as I said, and I'll finish on this. The owners of those platforms, yes, they might talk about all the altruism that's associated with Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all the rest of it, but they are being used to exploit young people in our community. And if they're not prepared to do something about it, well, then it is incumbent upon government to assist them in the process. Right? Because, of course, the parents can do as much as they like, but unless a parent takes their child and puts them in cotton wool and keeps them there from the time they're born till the time they reach adulthood, they're going to interact with those around them. And the worst thing a parent can do is take it from them and say, you're not going to have it, because the next thing they'll do, they'll find another way. They'll find an avenue to do it. That's just the instinct of a child. It's a different methodology nowadays, but it's the same instinct. So the parents can do as much as they can. The education system can do as much as it can. The platform owners can do as much as they can. But dare I say it, probably the inclination on the part of the platform owners is they'd be less inclined to do so than the other two. And so if they don't, it's up to government. So if there are any ways that government can intervene to ensure that there are restrictions on these platforms, to make sure that every child is being the best they can be every single day and they're not inhibited by sinister aspects of social media, well, then we've got to do it.
Members, the question is the motion be agreed. The Honourable Stephen Pratt.
Thank you very much, President, and thank the Honourable Sophia Momond for bringing this motion today. As we've seen already, it's a topic that everyone has an interest in. We've all got a stake in it. The Honourable Donna Farragut made note of today being Are You OK Day, and I think that's a good example of the positive use that social media can have in the community, trying to check in on mates and our loved ones and friends and maybe even someone that you don't know that well. Whilst we've been sitting here, my colleague, the member for Riverton, Dr Jaggs, posted a photo that we all took together quickly to promote Are You OK Day this morning. So it's another example of how that can be used. But I think the issue here is that for the most part we see the negative aspects, and I think it's the negative parts that we see more often, and the impact that that has on society more generally, even adults. But I know we're talking about usage for children going forward, and the way that for certainly the South Australian Premier Peter Malinauskas and now the federal government are looking at this issue. And I am curious as to the form this is going to take, and I'm glad that they are trialling some things and looking at this, and I think it's the beginning of a broader conversation across the community about how we act online, and I think social media is just one aspect. The Honourable Sophia Momond's motion today, B, C and D, show some of the really darker parts of the internet, and I think I'd like to focus on the social media aspect, but it shows how outside of social media there's even more negative things online, and it can be a dangerous place. So we've got to try and make it the safest place that we can for each other and for young people. Where was I going to go from there? So there's so many things that I want to touch on. I think it hasn't been mentioned, the use of fake accounts and aliases. I think this is a really dangerous aspect of social media that, again, the platforms have taken no responsibility for, and I think, as the Leader of the House mentioned, they could implement some sort of technology or software solution that would filter out these things. I'd like to touch on my experience in comparing my experience on LinkedIn to any other platform, Facebook, Instagram, X, which is a bit of a cesspit. LinkedIn, the experience is, for the most part, quite positive. People say positive things. I have seen some negative comments, but they're usually tempered because it says your name, it says where you work, and it says where you've worked previously. And so you get a good understanding of who that person is. And when you say something on that platform, you're speaking on behalf of the workplace that you're involved with. And I think that adds a layer of control over the content that is put on that platform and the language that people use and how we treat each other and speak to each other on that platform. And I think maybe there's something in that could be borrowed or utilised for some of these other platforms to add a layer of security or some sort of layer of comfort for people to go onto that platform knowing that they won't be targeted, they won't be attacked, and it's a nicer place, a more positive place. I think we in politics are easy targets for this stuff. It's pretty rare for you to post something on some of these social media platforms and not get some sort of negative comment or someone saying you're doing the wrong thing or you could be doing this better, Sometimes, that's fair game, but it can get much worse than that and the things people say. So I am interested in the form that this could take. When I was brainstorming this, I do wonder if it starts early with education, whether it could be some sort of licence, a pledge that you make. If you are a minor, your parents give you approval to have an account and then they bear the responsibility for what actions you take online. I think there needs to be these layers of security that cover off how people are going to behave on different platforms. I'm curious as well about where the line is drawn with this. I was talking to my 7-year-old daughter and I asked, should you be allowed to have a social media account? Or what age should you be allowed to? And thankfully last night she said 18 or 19. I think she'll be regretting that in a few years' time, but that's what she said. But then she said, but some of my friends have Messenger. So where is the line drawn? I think Messenger can be equally as dangerous. The Honourable Peter Collier mentioned it can be as simple as you being in a chat group and then being kicked out of that chat group. And that's exclusionary behaviour and it's bullying, and it can lead to even further negative aspects in the community. you know, a lot of the things that we've discussed today have been around bullying and the use of social media in terms of that. We've also seen other negative impacts in terms of incidents that have happened in other states earlier this year. There was a stabbing in a shopping mall, and some of the comments directly after that provided wrong information, and people then acted on that information and targeted the wrong people and led to vigilantism. And I think that's extremely dangerous. And again, I think the platforms have a responsibility to quickly act and make sure that people are seeing correct information. But I actually believe that it goes the other way, and the algorithms that they use feed this negative or false information to a particular demographic of people who are either going to take that information as fact, or they will share that and add their 2 cents to it, and it has a snowball effect in the community and adds fuel to the fire, and it can be extremely dangerous. I've touched on that. Oh, the Honourable Donna Faragher mentioned the use of tablets as well, and I know just with my kids, you know, playing games on the iPad, they're forced to watch ads, and there's no filter on these. You know, you are forced to watch ads to play a free game, and I've come over to look over their shoulder and seen ads that are definitely not appropriate for a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old, and I'm not sure that there's any way of stopping that at the moment. I'm happy to take advice on that. The Leader of the House also set into the microphones new pair of shoes. So I think not just Minister Ellery will be getting ads for new shoes, I think we all might be from now on. And it's another aspect that is concerning. Well, some people will be. The hip pocket might not be. Yeah, I guess it could be worse. So I touched on the LinkedIn experience, and I think that there is something in that. The only other thing I wanted to touch on, I heard Nadia Mitsopoulos on the radio the other day talking about dumb phones, this concept of people turning back the clock and trying to buy some of these older models of phones as a way to switch off from being constantly peppered with notifications and constantly checking your social media sites. And I think we could all probably do with some of that disconnection at times, but it can be addictive. And I think in this role, you want to be contactable at any time. You want to be responsive to people's needs in the community. And I think whilst that's a good thing, it can also wear on you. So I'm looking forward to seeing how governments implement some of these changes. It has happened overseas already, and I haven't seen how that's worked in effect, but I think I'm just glad that we're having this conversation about trying to make it safer for our kids. I think with the way things play out, by the time my kids are of the age that they may be looking at this stuff, we'll have some good strategies and legislation in place that makes the platforms accountable. And I think we still need to probably focus on education and resilience and making sure that we're good citizens online. Often I'll see some comments on some of my posts and think, you know, that bloke wouldn't say that to my face. You know, you sit behind a keyboard and you say things that you just wouldn't say if you were in front of a person. And I think we could all do a lot better than what's the current situation online.
Members, there are many people standing. I believe Clara Andrich, Honourable Clara Andrich.
Thank you very much, Acting President. I rise today to make a contribution on today's motion by the Honourable Sophia Mamond. Thank you for bringing the motion before the House. It is, in fact, a very important issue that affects, I think, each and every one of us. Certainly, I would believe every single one of us that are in this chamber today, and certainly those that young students who are in the public gallery earlier on today, or are still in the public gallery if they are. It is an issue that has certainly impacted my family. I am a mother of 2 girls. on each end of the age spectrum, one 9 going on to 10. So thankfully we don't have the issues of social media, and the other one 17 going on 18, who we've had to go through all the years of the impacts that social media can have on my oldest daughter, Angela. Now, both of my girls are at home because they are unwell today, and so I was able to have a really long consultation with them, asking them about the questions and what their opinions are when it comes to social media, phones, and particularly the 17-year-old, I should say, and how that's impacted her, particularly over the course of the last couple of years. And I know that they're watching. Would you believe it? Because Angela just texted me to say, hey, that guy's actually quite funny, ha, ha, ha. She was referring to the Honourable Peter Collier, which is the correct way I will refer to him. She's very unwell. The temperature's obviously going through the... No, hopefully not, because I have to stay here, so hopefully that's not the case. But that was her quick comment to me whilst he was making his contribution earlier on. But I did have a chat to them, and Angela in particular had many opinions. Some of the key areas that she said that how social media, be it TikTok, be it Instagram, be it Facebook and these platforms, the impact that it has on her. Number one she rated was body image. So she's constantly being forced to look at, photos that have in some occasions been altered, modified, AI, very unrealistic images coming through on her phone that relate to what sometimes, particularly at this age, they think that they should look like, very unrealistic, and it has an impact on their mental health and how they feel about themselves and their own confidence. And I've seen that with my oldest daughter, Angela, and it's very hard as a parent to have to remind them that what you see on social media is not what's out there, and it's not the real world, and it's not what we should be looking up to, and we're all different and we're all beautiful, and reiterating that to her can sometimes be difficult, and we've had our own struggles. But I think the older now that she's getting, the more she's realising that a lot of what is on social media is not something that she needs to be concerned about, and it's not a reflection of who she is, which is a beautiful young woman. The other issue that she said to me was FOMO. She's now in year 12, she's studying, she wants to get into uni, she's got a lot of studying to do, but it's at that age where she also wants to go out. She wants to have a social life, and so this is very difficult for her to manage. And I say to her, Angela, you've only got X amount of time to go, and just stick to your books, study hard, and you can celebrate and go out and after you finish year 12. But the fear of missing out is real. And she often feels compelled to go out and maybe put aside some of the studying. So that's another area we've had to deal with, because kids these days see what everyone's doing. TikTok is absurd, in my opinion, because every moment of their life is put on social media or this platform, and kids really feel like they're missing out if they're not living those lives. So this also leads me to lifestyle and what they see. Often many young children only portray the best parts of their life, and so those that are looking at their phones look at that and think, oh, I wish my life was like that, or I wish I could be here, or I wish I could be on that holiday, or I wish I could be enjoying wherever music festival they're at. And it can lead them to anxiety, and as we all know from various studies and surveys, and depression, because comparing lives and the unrealistic nature that these platforms present to children is of a great concern. I too commend our government's banning of phones in schools. I know of an incident a few years ago when I was first elected to Parliament that occurred with my daughter. Whilst it was a bit hard and she complained a little bit about it, I think in hindsight it's been an amazing decision. But children will be children, and sometimes they can sneak in phones and use them when they're not allowed to. And Angela made the very grave mistake of trying to FaceTime me from class with the then Education Minister, the Honourable Sue Ellery, sitting right in front of me. And so I gave the phone to Sue, to which Angela responded with this quick delete, block, stop. I got into a lot of trouble for that, because she turned around and said to me, "How dare you put the Education Minister," because Sue said, "Angela, what are you doing on your phone? How dare you put the Education Minister on the phone to me?" But yeah, that was an incident I'll never forget, and I'm certainly sure Angela will never forget as well. In regards to my youngest 9-year-old, who's going to be 10 soon, Alexandra, I asked her this morning the question. She's going to be 20, yes, I believe 20. Two very different children. When I asked Angela what age, she said, "Look, I understand, and I think, 14 to 16 is a good age group. It's give or take." She goes, "However, I think when a child really wants to, they'll probably find a way around it, and this is something that concerns me." So we understand that this is a great announcement. Certainly as a parent, I support it. We've just got to make sure that we find the best possible way, because as Honourable Sue Ellery mentioned, there has to be ways that we can ensure that children under whatever age is decided upon are unable to access these platforms. So Angela believes that whilst it's a great announcement, she's a little sceptical as to whether or not we can 100% bulletproof it, and I, to some degree, agree. Alexandra, on the other hand, I asked her what age, and she said to me 14 to 16, so I'm not sure if she's been watching the news, because I thought that was very interesting. However, she is a very different child, and this is something that I wanted to touch upon. Social media and these platforms can have a very very different impact depending on what kind of child you have. Angela is definitely a child I would say would be very much impacted on phone, and her usage, I would say, apologies Angela, because I know you're listening, is too much. But then you've got children like Alexandra, who's actually just not that keen on technology. And I didn't know what those phones were called, Honourable Stephen Pratt, but dumb phones? Yeah, well, that's the kind of phones we used to have back in my day. It was the very first phone that I got. It was,
Members, shall we not delve into past history? Honourable Clara Andrich.
Thank you very much, Acting President. This is an option that we've taken with Alexandra, and whilst we don't have the SIM card yet, I thought it was the most realistic way to be able to enable her to have a phone to contact me when I'm at work or when she's not with me, but still not enable all those things that come with it on the phone, because that's just simply something that I wouldn't allow at her age, certainly within my family. But Alex's view on it is a little bit different. She's not phased. I think that'll definitely change as she gets older, but she's certainly hasn't experienced what my 17-year-old has experienced over the last couple of years. I do want to add, members, and say that I do believe this new legislation will put forward by the federal government is one of the first steps in bringing power back to parents to enable us to raise our kids with more positive and certainly more healthier lifestyles. Thank you.
The Honourable Peter Foster.
Thank you, Acting President, and I rise to speak on the motion moved by the Honourable Sophia Lamond today. Thank you to the Honourable Sophia Lamond for giving us the opportunity to talk about social media. A lot of us here in this chamber use social media, as we've already talked about today. A lot of us are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. I want to acknowledge the comments of the Leader of the House. I absolutely agree with her comments around that the social media platforms have an obligation to, regulate or keep an eye on the content that is being shared on their platforms. And I agree with the comments of the Leader of the Opposition in regards to, I think it is the role of government to step in, because clearly the social media companies either don't want to or it's all too hard or can't be bothered. I think that we in this place have an obligation as leaders in our communities to be very careful with the information that we associate ourselves with and the information that we post ourselves online. I know that yesterday we finished debating a bill which was quite divisive for some people, quite damaging for some people. And one particular member in this chamber used social media to really drum the message that the bill was anti-women and anti-children, and really drummed up these sort of comments, encouraging people to post how they feel. Now, that member was the Honourable Nick Goran, and I spent a little bit of time this morning going through the comments. They always say to you, never look at the comments. I think we as members of this place who run social media platforms, we have an obligation to monitor those comments, to delete those comments, to hide those comments, to moderate those comments. For whatever reason, that member has chose not to do that, and I just want to read a couple of the comments. So this one was posted by Christine. She says, Labor seems to love sexual fringes so much that they have to elevate them even if it can create risky environmentals for young girls and women. It begs the question why. Ryan writes, welcome to the New World Order. If you haven't found God, find an artillery. Gavin writes, I think they are just protecting their pedo mates. No other reason, in my opinion. Ben writes, good way overdue, stuff the Greens and Labor's dodgy child grooming crap. And then Libby writes a really, really long comment. She says, once one understands that men who think they are women are actually men with a mental illness coupled with a sexual fetish, one can firmly take a stance against it. They get off on wearing women's clothes and indulge their sexual fantasies by hanging out in women's toilets and change rooms and perving at girls and women. Now, these are just some of the comments that were left on the Honourable Nick Goran's Facebook page, and I strongly encourage him to, or his staff, whoever runs his Facebook page, to moderate those comments, because they're very harmful to the LGBTQA+ community. We don't support pedophilia, we don't harbour pedos in our community, and this sort of continual, commentary that we do is really hurtful and it needs to stop. Now, last week, myself and the Honourable Matt Swinburne, we went to the Supreme Court where the Pride at Law were hosting an event. Now, Pride at Law has been around for a couple of years, and it's a group of LGBTQ lawyers and legal officers, and they get together, obviously, to meet one another, but also to talk about issues relating to our LGBTQA+ community. As a group, they make submissions about law reforms and about, things that they have seen in the court system that need to change. Now, I posted a photo on Instagram with the Honourable Matt Swinburne, congratulating the group on the successful launch and, wishing them well for the future. A member of this chamber, the Honourable Ben Dawkins, decided he needed to comment on this post, and this is what he writes. Is it important for officers of the court to promote their sexuality? Sounds a bit political when law is about objectivity. What a very strange bunch of people. Now, what did the Honourable Ben Dawkins mean by that comment? Who was strange? Because I actually think he was strange for commenting on my Instagram. Great that he seems to have taken an interest in what I do. But I find his particular comment really hurtful. Now, sadly, the Honourable Ben Dawkins is on Twitter, or X, and I'm not sure if people have seen the really awful video that he took the time to put together, where he's dressed in a skirt and a blouse with a WA Labor sticker on his face, trying to burst into a female change room going, let me in, I'm a woman. Now, don't suggest you go look at it, it's quite offensive. But what is he thinking when he posts that sort of crap on social media, that rubbish that he is posting on social media? We, as leaders in this community, we absolutely have an obligation, well, for what we say, because the words that we say in this chamber reflect on others, but also on our social media platforms, because his commentary, his videos, his comments are actually hurtful to other people. And I think a few members today have talked about cyberbullying. I think a few members here today have talked about, you know, young people who are being bullied online and make the decision to end their life. You just have to Google it. There's numerous young people, often 14 and 15-year-old young people who are really bullied online, and so they think that there's no way out, and they take their life. And we need to, I think as parents, I mean, a few members today have spoken about their own children. I have a 10-year-old. He uses Messenger Kids to communicate with his friends. He makes friends at school. The friends have moved away, and so every now and then they ring each other and check in and see how each other is doing, which I think is really nice. He also talks to his cousins that way. He also talks to his grandmother, my mum, that way, because, you know, she lives in a different state, so they're able to use Messenger Kids and communicate. And I really like that because it means that he can stay connected to his family and to his friends. As a parent, of course, I'm usually in the other room eavesdropping because I don't want him to be unsafe online, and I think that's, you know, a reflection on all of us as parents, that we do have an obligation to keep our children safe. I believe everybody has an obligation to keep everybody safe. So we all need to, you know, keep an eye on our kids for what they're using. There's a lot of online games. I think the Honourable Stephen Pratt talked about online games. There's a lot of young people like World of Warcraft, Minecraft, Roblox. There's all these games that the young ones are playing, and there is a chat function where they can communicate with each other. So we do have to, you know, we do have to watch out for that. I want to finish by just talking a little bit about keeping children safe, and I've made a member statement in regards to this before. There was an event held down in Albany a couple of weeks ago that the Honourable Sophia Mamond attended, and I've got a copy of the transcript, and I just want to read two particular things that were talked about at this meeting. The Honourable Sophia Mamond talked about safeguarding, and I think the word safeguarding has been weaponised. And she also talked about grooming, and I also think the word grooming is now being weaponised. Now, Michelle Kinsellis is a former One Nation candidate. She seemed to be the ringleader to bring this event together. Now, one of the things they talked about was the game Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I don't know if people have played Dungeons and Dragons. When I was at high school all those years ago, I played Dungeons and Dragons with my friends. Don't see playing Dungeons and Dragons as grooming, but anyway, this is what Michelle Kinsellis says. And I'm quoting from the transcript. She says, "I'm not sure if anyone's played Dungeons and Dragons. I haven't. I've just seen people playing it on the movies. There's a lot of role-playing going on. So what role is a 12-year-old going to take on playing Dungeons and Dragons with a transgender community, an LGBTQIA+, with a 25-year-old man? So I want you to sit with that for a minute, and then when you go home, have a look at Dungeons and Dragons and see what sorts of things are going on. And then I want you to visualise a 12-year-old being dropped off because the parents can't go in because parents are over the age of 25. There's no parental supervision. So you've got parents dropping off, a lot of them, who don't know. Little 12-year-olds to hang out doing role-playing with a 25-year-old. We know this is child sex abuse. 30% of all child sex abuse is being conducted by peers. It's not the stranger down the road. It is in these sorts of groups, these grooming groups. That's how we see this." Now, I say to Michelle Kinsellis, I'm not sure what Dungeons and Dragons game she played, but when I was back at school, we played warriors, we played mages, we rolled the dice and we attacked somebody, we raced through the dungeon. We didn't talk about, you know, sex things whilst we were playing the game. So, you know, I just find that comment a little bit odd. And then further in the transcript, she talks about the Welcome to Sex book, and I've spoken about that before. And in the transcript, she's basically accusing librarians of grooming because they read a book to a child. She says, they don't seem particularly interested until I asked the mayor if he'd like his granddaughter to be taught how to masturbate. And then that got their attention. Because these are our children, whether it's my child I birth, whether it's a community, a niece, anybody. These are our children, all of them. I know if I sat down on the town square with the neighbours and megaphone and started reading Welcome to Sex, Now, any library, any person that's going to sit down and read
Order.
a book teaching a child how to masturbate is a groomer.
Order. The Honourable Louise Kingston.
It's okay.
Yesterday about decentralisation and bring you back to the fact that the World Wide Web, when it was introduced, actually connected us to a much, much bigger world than what we were used to. We use the saying, takes a village to raise a child. We won't no longer have those villages. And children are exposed to things that they wouldn't normally have been exposed to, as the Honourable Peter Collier talked about with his child and also my childhood as well, and how connected we were and how protective we were of each other. You know, I don't remember very much bullying in my early childhood, but clearly that has escalated significantly. I have 4 grown daughters and now I have grandchildren who, you know, all interact with the different forms of social media. And that they started when this social media began, and it was hugely problematic. And those conversations had to be had between us as parents and those kids on how to manage this social media. So I think in that respect we were actually quite lucky because they didn't have it to start with. So I think we need to get back to looking at how we actually teach these kids about what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. We need to be 2 steps ahead of the new technology that is coming instead of 2 steps behind it, which with hackers we are. Banking industry and stuff like that are really struggling with these hackers. So I think engaging those kids, having those conversations with them, as the Honourable Clara Andrick alluded to as well, so that we can ensure that these kids are protected from any of this new technology that's being developed.
Members, the time for debate has concluded and the motion lapses. Should we